Hello, my name is Alison and I'm going to present to you my Master's in Counseling final research project on spiritual screening and therapy. So just to share some personal information about me and why I chose this topic, I'm religious and spiritual, and my academic focus during the majority of this master's course has been on the intersection between spirituality and mental health counseling. I've been training as an integrative, primarily person-centered counselor who tries to understand and respect all dimensions of my clients' experiences, including their spirituality. I'm also an American board-certified music therapist with extensive experience working in the field of addiction recovery, which in the United States often involves the 12 Steps of Recovery program. First, I'll introduce some background research on religion and spirituality in psychology, different ways that they've been integrated into treatment, what is spiritual screening, and what are the aims and hypotheses in this study. And then I'll talk about the participant groups, procedures, and research design in the methods section. In the results section, I'll share some main findings, and then finally I'll discuss the implications and areas for future research. So first of all, most of the world is religious, but in Western societies like the UK, the statistics are much lower these days. About half of Britons identify as religious or spiritual, according to recent polls, and a lot of people are now identifying as spiritual but not religious. And then because of things like globalization and people moving around, there's a good chance that counselors will come across people who have a variety of different beliefs and non-beliefs. So we know that religion and spirituality do influence all areas of people's lives, and it can be really difficult to define what they mean to people because they can be very subjective, especially spirituality, but there's been a lot of research done over the last 10-20 years, and generally speaking, religion and spirituality are positively associated with good mental, emotional, and physical health, but the exceptions to this rule can involve some complex negative interactions, such as when somebody experiencing psychosis, for example, might also have religious content in their experience. The BACP and the BPS both offer guidance to understand, respect, and respond to clients' spiritual needs, and the BPS actually echoes that previous point that spirituality can be really good for some clients, but that when it doesn't appear to be helpful, that this is important as well and should also be considered by the therapist. So actually there seems to be quite a lot of consideration made for spirituality in the medical and clinical psychology fields recently. In counseling, we do look at this dimension to some extent in some of the mainstream secular therapies, such as the humanistic-derived therapies, family therapy, even DBT and ACT. Both of those use mindfulness and meditation techniques, which come from Buddhism originally. And by the way, there is a distinction made between RS interventions like mindfulness and meditation, for example, and RS therapy, which is its own type of approach. So both clients and counselors generally want to or are willing to address client religion and spirituality in therapy, but they don't often do it. Many counselors are uncomfortable or afraid of offending clients. Many religious or spiritual clients are also afraid of being judged or not taken seriously by their counselors, and some say that they prefer that their counselors bring up the topic for them so that they feel more supported to share. And clients do report positive experiences of discussing these topics when they feel that therapists show a genuine interest and make an effort to understand and respect their spirituality or religion. So here's where spiritual screening comes in. Spiritual screening asks clients whether religion or spirituality is important to them in order to understand how it may influence their treatment. So, a few studies have been done on spiritual screening and assessments in the psychiatric and forensic settings, which was very positive for the RS clients, helping their treatment compliance, therapeutic alliance, and general engagement, and had no negative impact on anyone else. But there hasn't been a whole lot of research done in the non-acute or non-crisis counseling contexts. Also, professionals have mixed opinions about when spiritual screening should take place, whether it should be during an intake assessment or during the course of therapy. The aim of this study is primarily exploratory in that I was interested in the demographics, attitudes, and experiences of clients and counselors. I did hypothesize that participants would indicate positive attitudes towards spiritual screening, but kind of minimal experience with it, and that those who have experience with it would report a positive impact on therapy. I also looked at the impact of context of spiritual screening, but I did not have a hypothesis for that. The study had ethical approval through the university and was able to test 124 adult clients and counselors in the UK, recruited through SONA, the BACP Research Notice Board, email circulation, and various social media platforms. The study used an original questionnaire, which of course did carry a risk of bias, but this was mitigated as much as possible through adhering to best research practices and feedback from the principal investigator. There was a client version and a counselor version, which were very similar to each other. The questionnaire had two parts. The first part was focused more on demographics, and the second part was about spiritual screening. Some questions were multiple response, a few were close-ended. Most of them used the Likert scale, and then at the very end there was a box for people to type in their general thoughts and feelings about the topic. The study was a quantitative independent measures design. It used an ANOVA, which looked at the impact of role, RS, and spiritual screening on attitude towards spiritual screening. It used an independent samples t-test, and it also used a Spearman's correlation within the extensive descriptive analysis. There were many findings from this study, but I'll try to summarize the most important ones. Out of the 124 responses, 79 of those were kept. There were more counselors than clients. Most were female, and the ages were pretty diverse, and over half of them identified as religious or spiritual. The most popular RS affiliations were Christian and spiritual but not religious, and you can glance over this table to see for yourself, but really what we're interested in is comparing the client and the counselor groups with each other. So as you can see, more counselors than clients reported religious or spiritual affiliation. Very few clients experienced being asked about their spirituality in therapy compared to a significant number of the counselors. You can see where the conversations took place, and you can also see the overall positive impact and attitude toward spiritual screening reported by the participants. The study also asked a series of questions about attitudes towards importance and relevance of client spirituality to the clients, to their mental health, to counseling, and for counselors to understand. It also looked at the RS clients and all of the counselors, and both clients and counselors had strong positive correlations between relevance of RS beliefs to mental health and relevance to counseling, but no significant correlations with importance for counselors to understand. So the ANOVA and the t-test both gave us some significant results. Number 1 equals extremely negative, and number 7 equals extremely positive attitudes in the graphs. The study found that experience of spiritual screening had a more positive impact on attitude towards spiritual screening compared to no experience of it, which was neutral, and also that spiritual screening during the course of therapy as opposed to during an intake assessment also had a more positive impact on therapy, which was neutral. I just want to show this word cloud as a visual representation of the responses to the open-ended prompt at the end, which were very, very superficially coded. And you can see the big words like important to ask is the largest, but close behind that is client initiated. So this sort of reflects the variety of thoughts, feelings, and experiences that the participants described about discussing religion and spirituality in therapy. Finally, we get to the discussion, and our main hypotheses were supported by the study. We also found that spiritual screening during the course of therapy had a more positive impact on therapy than during intake assessments. And to my knowledge, this was a new area of investigation, so there was no hypothesis for it, but what this might tell us is that the client and counselor might need to build some rapport first rather than asking questions too early on in therapy. Also, the significant correlation between importance and relevance of clients' spirituality to their mental health and to counseling, but not to importance for counselors to understand, is interesting, and that this incongruence could possibly reflect that underlying anxiety coming from both the clients and the counselors. I think it's also worth noting that this study was done in the UK, where certain topics like religion tend to be more private and discussed less openly than in the US, for example. So maybe it's worth being aware of these cultural factors. I also think it's worth noting that most of the atheist and agnostic clients indicated that their beliefs are very or extremely important to them. There may have been a sampling bias for the counselors because they were a lot more religious and spiritual than the clients were, and the fact that more counselors than clients indicated experience of spiritual screening could reflect previous research that RS clients are perhaps more inclined to explore RS when they consider it to be important for themselves personally. Most of the counselors in this study reported that they did not receive training on religion and spirituality in their counseling courses. So there are things that counselors might be able to do to overcome those clinical barriers. Using a multicultural competence framework, counselors may want to develop a basic competence reflecting on their own beliefs and value to develop their self-awareness. They may want to brush up on the major world religions, obviously understanding that the client's personal meanings are the most relevant in therapy, and also what current research has to say about spirituality and mental health, and to also develop some skills in spiritual screening. There are a lot of different spiritual screening and assessment tools out there, but I think the value of this study is that it suggests that counselors can take a respectful and sensitive yet assertive interest in understanding this dimension or understanding whether it's important to the clients. We don't have to feel that this is a taboo topic because many clients' attitudes towards discussing it are positive. Unfortunately, psychology in the past has labeled religion as neurotic or pathological, but counselors may be able to help undo that archaic stigma. If a client prefers not to share or does not associate with spirituality or religion at all, we can respect that, of course, but at least they know that the door is open to them. Listening for spiritual language like "it's all happening for a reason" or "I deserve this" might give the counselors some clues for when to broach the topic. Also offering a very broad existential definition of spirituality as a source of value and meaning or purpose in the client's life could give some clients a starting point for understanding what spirituality could mean. And this does raise some good questions about what it means to consider the spiritual dimension of well-being, because spirituality could be relevant to more than just the people who explicitly identify as religious or spiritual if we consider that there's a lot of crossover between the existential themes often dealt with in both psychology and spirituality or religion, as well as similarity between many spiritual goals and mental health goals like peace, gratitude, acceptance, love, connection, forgiveness, which are a bit more emotionally complex and kind of intangible. If spirituality, again in a very broad sense, means that humans are more than a combination of biology and environment, then this more may have its own considerations for well-being. Future research could focus on the client group because there were a lot more counselors who participated in this study. And finally, future research could look at adding a control group to measure the impact of spiritual screening versus no spiritual screening on particular therapeutic outcomes like treatment compliance, therapeutic alliance, and therapeutic engagement. Okay, so I just want to end with this beautiful quote by Henry Nouwen, who was a Dutch writer on psychology and spirituality that has stuck with me for several years now and captures what I feel is often the essence of therapy. I was forced to enter the basement of my soul and look directly at what was hidden there, and to choose in the face of it all, not death but life. Thank you so much for watching, and please feel free to leave some comments below.